We're now going to begin Be'ezer Hashem, Masechet Chagigah, Daf Beis Amud Aleph. The Torah says, Sholosh pa'amim b'shana yera'eh kol schurcha es pnei ha'adon Hashem. The emphasis here is on the word yera'eh, which is called the mitzvah of re'iyah. And this mitzvah of re'iyah applies Sholosh pa'amim b'shana on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And it's not enough just to show up, and that's called Riyas Panim. We also are required to bring karbanos. There are three categories of karbanos. One is called the Ola, otherwise known as the Olas Re'iyah. The other is called Shlomim, and Shlomim itself divides into two categories, the Shalmei Chagigah and the Shalmei Simcha. And the Torah says, V'lo yero panai rekom. So it's not enough to come on Aliyah l'regel. You can't go rekom. You shouldn't show up in the Azor on the regel with empty hands, so to speak, but rather you should bring the Karban Ola, which is the Olas Re'iyah, and the Shalmei Chagigah, and the Shalmei Simcha. So Mishnah says, Hakol Chayovim B'Re'iyah. Everyone has to show up in the Azora, in the Beis HaMikdash, on the three regalim, Chutz micheresh, shote, v'katan. Now these three form a unit of what's called lav bar das, lav b'nei deah. And they are potter from all mitzvahs of the Torah. And of course, likewise, they're potter from re'iyah. Then we have a tumtum whose private genital areas are closed up. There's a membrane that closes them, so we don't know if it's a zachar or a nekeva. And androgynous has both simone zachrus and simone nakvus. The nashim, and we'll see why nashim excluded. The pasuk says yera kol zechurcha, which is a reference to the males, to the exclusion of the nashim. And then we have Havadim Sheina Mishuchrorim, and Eved has the same status as an Isha, and whatever mitzvahs he's exempt from, she's exempt from, he's exempt from. That's called Lo Lo Bi Isha. Ve'hachiger, someone who cannot walk on his own, he needs some sort of an aid, a crutch. He's potter from Re'iyah. Suma, and we'll see about someone who's blind in one eye as opposed to blind in both eyes. Hachole, vazoken, umisheni yochel laos beraglov. Anyone who, even though he's not technically a chiger, but he cannot on his own make it up to the Azora. All the above are exempt from the mitzvah of Re'iyah. Ezu katan. What defines a katan, the Mishnah asks, who is potter from the mitzvah of Aliyah? At what point is he no longer katan, he's chayiv in Aliyah? Kol sheni yochel lirkov al kseifav shel aviv v'lalos mishalayim la'arbayis divrei Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai say that if you have a child that is old enough to be taken to Yerushalayim, let's say in a chariot, in a wagon, he's not necessarily chayiv in re'iyah. He's got to be at the age when he's yachol lirkov al kseifav shel aviv. It's not enough that we can take him to Yerushalayim. He has to be able to be carried on the shoulders of his father. That's Beit Shammai. Beis Hillel omrim kol sheni yochel lechos biyado shel aviv v'lalos mishalayim la'arbayis. If he's so young that when his father would hold his hand and take him up to Yerushalayim, he's not capable of being taken by his father, then he's so young that he's exempt from Re'iyah, shenemar shalosh regalim, and the word regalim is a reference to someone who could go up by his feet. Again, he's going to climb up to Yerushalayim with the aid of his father, but nevertheless, he can walk to Yerushalayim. If he's so young that he cannot walk to Yerushalayim, then that's not called regalim, because the Torah says you're only chayev if you're yachol lalos birigolim. Rigolim means biragla. There's a note here. He says, "Gam mitzvahs chinuch nemrod ak b'koton ayochol lalos biragla." Koton yoter, if he's younger, he's more of a koton. Potter af sheyochol lirkov al kisvei of. Whereas Beis Shammai would say that if his father could carry him on his shoulders, then you're obligated to take the child. Beis Hillel would say no. It's not enough that you're old enough to be carried on your father's shoulders. You have to be old enough to walk on your feet. Now, according to the Torah law, a carbon does not have to have a minimum value on the market. There's no shiur of shivu in carbonos. And this is based on a pasuk, ish kematnas yado, which means that whatever you bring, you bring. However, the Chachamim made a takana, a minimum value of the carbon. What is that minimal value? So the Mishnah presents the following controversy. Beit Shammai Omrim Areia, which means the carbon olas re'ia, they kesef. It has to be valued at a minimum of 2 ma'os of kesef. Now, there's something called a ma, and there's something called a dinar. So there are 6 ma'os in a dinar, and here we're only requiring 1/3 of a dinar, which is 2 ma'os. So 2 times 2, 2 plus 2 plus 2 would be a dinar, and all you have to do is bring 2 ma'os, which is 1/3 of a dinar. However, the Chagigah, in the case of the Karma Chagigah, ma'a kesef. All you need is half that amount. In other words, the Karma Chagigah is a carbon shlomim, and it only comes from a behema, but it's possible to have a very minimum shear, and it's not worth more than a ma. Let's say a young animal, and that's fine according to Beit Shammai. Beis Hillel omrim hareia ma kesef v'chagigah shtei kesef. According to Beis Hillel, the carbon re'ia, which Beit Shammai required 2 mos, it's sufficient if you have 1 mo. So basically, Beis Hillel cuts it in half. And Chagigah, shtei kesef. But on the other hand, when it comes to the carbon Chagigah, which according to Beis Shammai was only 1 mo, according to Beis Hillel, we require 2 mos. And the Gemara is going to explain this machlok. Gemara asks, "Hakol asuye mai." Whenever it says the word "hakol," it's coming to include something. Asuye misha chetzio eved chetzio ben chorim. In other words, even though an eved is parted from re'iyah, but if he's a chatzi ben chorim, there were 2 partners over the eved. One partner was meshachrer, and he freed his half of the eved. So that free half of the eved is chayiv in re'iyah, despite the fact that his other half is an eved that is potter from you. So the Gemara asks, "Ula Ravina diyomer misha chetzi eved chetzi ben chorin potter min re'iyah." Ravina is of the opinion that the chatzi avdu shabo is mafkia the chiyuv re'iyah, is hakol asuye mai, asuye chiger biyom rishon, v'nispashet biyom sheni. What happens in the case of a man who on the first day of Chag, he was lame, and then by the time he got to the second day of Chag, they brought him to the physician or whatever it is, and now he's capable of walking. So such a person, even though he was exempt on the first day as a chiger, he's still chayiv in re'iyah. That's what the Mishnah indicates by the word hakol. And why is he chayiv in re'iyah? Because already on the second day of Chag, he became healthy, and he could walk on his feet. And that situation of healthy on Yom HaSheni Shel HaChag is enough to generate a chiyuv re'iyah. That's a gewaldige chidush. Now the Gemara has an objection to Ravina. And this is based on a Mishnah later on in Daf Tes. Mishalo hikriv shalmei Chagigah b'yom rishon. If he omitted the shalmei Chagigah on the first day of Chag, then he could bring it any of the other days, the balance of the Chag. And the same thing applies to Olas Re'iyah. So the Gemara is going to learn that we have a machlokes. This is again a sugya daf tes, but we're going to quote it here about these days from day 2 to day 7 vis-a-vis the Karban Chagigah. Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that all these days are tashlumin l'rishon, because the main chiyuv is on the first day of the Chag. The other days of the Chag are tashlumin. What does that mean, tashlumin? It means that you can pick up that chiyuv of yesterday, of Yom Rishon, on Yom Sheni. Now, if he was potter on Yom Rishon, according to Rabbi Yochanan, then he's not going to be chayiv on Yom Sheni because it's a tashlum. But Rav Oshia disagrees, and he says, Kol hayomim tashlumin zeh lozeh. Which means that in addition to the din of tashlumin, there's also a separate chiyuv. And that chiyuv is independent of the rest of the days. And that chiyuv emerges on day 2 if he did not fulfill his mitzvah on day 1. So whereas Rabbi Yochanan holds that if you are not chayiv on day 1, then you're not chayiv in tashlumin. Rav Oshia would say you're chayiv in tashlumin. However, there's also an independent chiyuv that's generated by every day of Yontif unto itself. And that would be chal, a chiyuv, even if he was parted from Yom Rishon. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan would say, if he's not chayiv on Yom Rishon, then there's no obligation vis-a-vis the rest of the days. There's no tashlumin if you weren't chayiv from the get-go. So now let's get back to our Mishnah. The way Ravina interpreted the Hakol. He was a chiger b'yom rishon, and then his pasha b'yom sheni. I understand very well that if all the days are tashlumin, and in this case, he was a chiger b'yom rishon. Now he's in his pasha b'yom sheni. Just 1 second. So according to Rav Yoshia, that we said kulam tashlumin zeh lezeh, which means that each day has its own independent chiyuv. So again, he was part on the first day, he'll be chayiv because of the second day. And that's hakol asuyei mai according to Ravina. Ela mandi ambar according to Rabbi Yochanan. Kulon tashlumin l'rishon. There's no tashlum for each day unto itself. It's all tashlum for the first day. it can't be therefore that a Chigah on day one who was Nispashet would be Chayav because he didn't have a Chiv on day one, and therefore if Kulon Tashlumin L'Rishon, there's no Tashlumin when he wasn't Chayav. Takol Asuye Mai, Asuye Suma Bi'achas Me'enov. You might have thought that if he's blind in one eye, we already give him the status of a Suma and he's parted from Re'iyah. Kamash Malana Mishnah says Hakol Chayavim, even though he has no sight in one of his eyes. With the Loki Aitana, but this interpretation of our Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is against the Tana of the Bryce that we're about to learn. Tisanya Yochanan ben Davai Omer Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Suma Bi'achas Meinav Potum Min HaRe'iyah. We see the exact opposite of what we said, that our Mishnah is Hakol Asiyeh Mai to be Machayev a Suma Bi'achas Meinav. Here we see in Yochanan ben Davai that a Suma B'chad Einav in one of his eyes is parted from Re'iyah. How does Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai derive this conclusion? Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, Suma Bi'achas Meinav Parted Min HaRe'iyah. How do we know that if he's blind in one eye, against what we said before, that Akol Asuye Suma B'achas Meinav, now we're saying he's parted from Re'iyah because he doesn't have sight in both eyes. And from whence do we derive this? It says in the parasha Sholosh Pam Bashana Yera'eh Kol Zchurcha. However, there's a Kri and a Ksiv. So the way it's Ksiv, it's Yera'eh. And it means that a person will see Hashem. But the Kri is Yera'eh, which means that a Kadosh Baruch Hu should see him. And now we have a Hekesh in the Pasuk. And this Hekesh is going to teach us that you need a Re'iyah which is similar to the Re'iyah of Hashem when Hashem sees us. And that's called Yireh Yeroeh. Kiderech Shava Liros, just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to see us, and that's the Kri of Yeroeh, we will be seen by the Almighty. Kach ba leiraos, so to Yireh, he will see. Ma liros b'shtei yadav, af leiros b'shtei yadav. Shtei einav. So just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees man b'shtei einav, kaviyachol, so too man has to be able to see with both eyes, and therefore suma b'ayinachas is potem in ari. So this is all the Shita Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore our Mishnah that Hakol Asuye Mai, according to Ravina, means Lasuye. No, not according to Ravina. I'm sorry, according to the Maskana, is Lasuye Suma Bi'achas Meinav Chayav. That's against Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that we have a drasha from which we derive that Suma Bi'achas Meinav is parted from Re'iyah. Ibais Ema. Let's go back to our original position that the word Hakol is a ribi for Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chor. Now you ask the question about Ravina, because Avodim She'enim Mishuchrorim and Misha Chetzi Eved Ben Chorim Potem Min HaRe'iyah. Lo kasha kan b'mishnah rishona v'kan b'mishnah achrona. So now we're going to introduce a new sugya of Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin, and it's going to be a Mishnah Rishona, and then rescinding the Mishnah Rishona, there's going to be a Mishnah Shniya. So when it says that Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin is patur from the mitzvah, that reflects the Shita Beis Hillel in Mishnah Rishona, in the original. But when we see our Mishnah opens up with Hakol Chayavim, which we said is coming last Suye to include Chetzi Eved, Chetzi Ben Chorin, that's the Mishnah Achrona, and that's the way that Beis Hillel conclude rejecting their original position. Where is this machlok between Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai? This nine we learned in the Mishnah Gittin. Misha Chetzi o Eved Chetzi Ben Chorin Oved es Rabo Yom Echad es Atzmo Yom Echad Dever Beis Hillel. So we divide up the days. So on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, the Chatzi Eved will work in the house of the master. But on Monday and Wednesday and Friday, whatever it is, those 3 days, he doesn't have to work it all for anybody, because those are the days of Es Atzma. Amru lahem Beit Shammai.